en México, Estados Unidos y América Latina. Saludos especiales a Brian Woerner, el fundador de World Honey Exchange, y a Germán Santillán, que de aquí de México, empresario, alumno del programa Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative del año 2016, y el CEO y el fundador de Oaxacanita Chocolate. I'm going to speak in English, do some Spanish, but for those who don't speak any English, por favor, si no hablan inglés, seleccionen el servicio de interpretación simultánea que está a la parte inferior de sus pantallas. Bueno, buenas tardes. My name is Roberto Quiroz. I'm the counselor for cultural affairs at the U.S. Mission in Mexico City. And it's an honor to be here with all of you in session number 3 of Masterminds. I want to thank Miguel Vasquez from our team for his work on this project in partnership with each of you. As you all know, the small and medium-sized businesses are crucial. In fact, they're vital to promoting economic development in North America, as well as Central, South America, and around the world. And they need innovative ideas. They need committed people like each and every one of you to put them into practice. Cada uno de ustedes, empresarios que son necesitados para el desarrollo de nuestra economía global, aquí en América Latina, Norteamérica, Sudamérica y en el mundo entero. The U.S. Embassy supports entrepreneurs like each of you through our programs like the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative, the Academy of Women Entrepreneurs, and the Professional Scholars Program, among many others. We encourage you to apply. Esperamos que apliquen a estos programas para poder desarrollarse profesionalmente de mano en mano con nosotros. For those of you who have participated, we ask that you share the news about these programs with those who might want to participate. Les pedimos que compartan sus experiencias en estos programas para que así inspiren a otra juventud y participantes a ser parte de nuestros esfuerzos. Mastermind Sessions pairs a Mission Mexico alumnus with an expert from the United States. That's why Germán Santillán's work is so important in partnership with Brian Woerner. We are very proud to welcome them today to this program and to hear about their experiences and to learn and to share our best practices as well. We hope to hear from you and that you establish a strong partnership with them. And finally, I want to thank Kingala, the U.S. Embassy's implementing partner, for this virtual conference series. We appreciate all the work that they do to strengthen entrepreneurship in Mexico. And finally, on behalf of Ambassador Ken Salazar here in Mexico City, I just want to say we salute every one of you because you have dared to embark upon entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity. The world of 2023 has changed tremendously to the 20th century that I grew up in. It is minds like yours, that's what we call it masterminds, minds like yours, that are going to build the future of the world. And it's going to be charting the direction in which we're going to go to in the second half of the 21st century and beyond for our children and grandchildren. So felicidades a todos. Gracias por permitir que trabajemos juntos con ustedes y muy buena suerte hoy en este programa.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Roberto. It is just a pleasure to be today with you. My name is Germán Santillán, and I am the founder and CEO of Oaxacanita Chocolate, and it's truly an honor to be today sharing with all the entrepreneurs across the Americas what we have been living from a rural community. Today is a very special day where we are celebrating the 3rd session of the Masterminds program, which is a very cool initiative that the U.S. Embassy to Mexico is supporting with Kingala. And I want to deeply thank your invitation for today's meeting. I have the tremendous pleasure to introduce you to one of my biggest friends of the entrepreneurial world, which name is Brian Woerner. I am so happy to give the welcome to him. And first of all, I want you to write in the chat your name, your city, where are you listening to us, and what are you doing? Let's try to connect each other during this session because I truly believe that these sessions are very important for us to create more connections, to learn more from each other. And we want to thank you all for your presence here during this session. So, first of all, I would like to give the word to Brian Werner and to ask him about what is he doing, what are their interests, what is he working towards. So, Brian, I'm very happy to give you the welcome. Thank you so much for accept this invitation. I am more than happy to have you here. Just to let you know, guys, just some months ago, Brian Werner came to Oaxaca. He stayed with me in the house with her lovely wife, with Anchal, that I send greetings to her. But yeah, we want to hear more from you, Brian. So please give us an introduction for all the attendees, please.
Oh, muchas gracias a todos por todos. And yeah, sorry, my Espanol needs some work, but we'll continue in English and I'll try to be clear. Germán, thank you for setting this up and for connecting me and connecting all these people as you do. Just such a great pleasure and privilege to know you, and by extension, the whole community that's here. You know, I hope we cross paths in person sometime in this sort of world that's become so remote in so many ways. That said, yes, my name is Brian Woerner. Let's see, I'm living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, near Boston. I started a company called World Honey Exchange, so I'm the founder and CEO of that, and we work with beekeeping groups and cooperatives and communities around the world, beekeepers and people that work with beekeepers in order to connect those beekeepers to new markets. And on the flip side of that, we try to show markets what the world has to offer in terms of unique products and stories in the world of honey. So my goal is to really create pathways actually for cultural exchange through the use of honey. So carrying on the story of the origin to the end consumer, wherever that is and however it's consumed. So it's really critical that we build these linkages, these cultural connections, and these real human relationships along the way, which is a lot of fun, but it also creates a huge amount of value when you're working directly with people and building direct relationships and can see impact. So that's what I work on most of my time. And I do a lot of that through direct visitations. As Germán said, I was lucky enough to be visiting him and his family, his gracious family in Oaxaca last year. And we are working on a project there to basically source honey and bring that honey and that project visibility in markets here in the US. Additionally, one really cool thing that happened as I was a Wildlife host and also a reverse exchange participant in Colombia, we hosted our beekeeping partner Javier Gantiba, I believe it was 2018, and then did a reverse exchange, and that led to a pilot shipment of his honey from his forest regeneration project in 2019, and just last week we landed a 10-ton shipment from his project. So we've
Cool.
grown tenfold, and that started with the wildlife program. So his honey is now going to be going into honey wine and beer and other products across the country. So
Perfect. So Brian, these are very, very amazing insights, and this is a very cool presentation of you. For all the people that is connected in this session, that I have been reading your comments, I have been reading that you are coming from Honduras, from different parts of the world. I am very happy to hear that there is a whole bunch of rural entrepreneurs, and that is one of the main goals of this activity, trying to figure out how we as rural entrepreneurs or people that is working with rural communities can engage even more. And I want to share with you some very interesting data because, for example, today it is well known that according to the World Bank data, even while the indigenous peoples represent the 6% of total population of the world, the indigenous peoples and rural communities are the ones that are protecting the 80% of the natural resources of the planet. So I think that more than ever, it is more important that we can create bondings and bonds with rural communities and big cities so we can create more opportunities for them. And with this point of view, Brian, I just want to ask you if you can share with us as an US company, as an US entrepreneur, how is to be that process? You know, most of us that are coming from rural communities, we always look for trying to engage with the market in the US. We try to engage with, like exportation of our goods. But from your point of view, Brian, what do you think that a rural entrepreneur must understand and must learn to create these kind of exchanges?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's okay.
Puta, me va a llevar, puta, la voy a tener que escuchar en inglés.
Was that?
It was another comment, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so it's a great question. And it's okay to not know as a rural entrepreneur, maybe where to start. And I think this is a great spot to start. Look at the community you have access. Look at the resources that you have at hand, which may not always feel like a lot, but one of the hard parts about agriculture and one of the amazing things about and we're speaking in the context of agriculture is that you're starting from the ground and you're starting with a natural resource. One of the things that got me into this was seeing the beauty and the potential in natural zones, in agricultural activities that were done well. And by done well, I mean you're trying to produce something that is of quality, and that quality needs to meet up with the expectations, meaning that, let's say I am a producer of chocolate. What are the standards that the market, and not the final market necessarily, but what are the standards that the person that I'm going to be working with expects? And not just that, but how do we start forming a pathway to commerce? That is a relationship, and the basis of all this stuff is a relationship. And a relationship, whether it's between a producer and a buyer in rural Oaxaca, or a producer of honey in East Africa and Tanzania and here, is built on trust. And so what is trust, and where that starts is introduction and doing what you say you're going to do, and being open to the possibility of hearing things that you don't want to hear, and doing the work to improve what you're doing, You should also expect that from the people that you work with. This is not a one-way street. Producers
Yeah.
should also feel empowered that what they have is worth something. And I think one of the most important things is to understand what you're producing and what it's worth in different markets. So that's a different sort of leading into a little bit of a different subject, but I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
No, well, Brian, I think that insight is very interesting because for the people that is together connected right now in this session, they have to know that you have been working with communities across the world in Tanzania, in Latin America, and for example, I just remember that when we were here in Oaxaca, you shared with me a bunch of vainilla, and it was amazing to have, like a product that was produced in a rural community that now crosses all the world to make it to Oaxaca. And one of the things that I want to ask you to is, for example, what are those challenges that you have faced as a US company to put or to put into the market these kind of products in the US market? And what are, in other side, the challenge that the people you work with has been dealing with their own productions, so we can figure it out, like what are those challenges that you already have, and what are some kind of strategies that you follow to overcome them?
yeah, so like I mentioned, quality is one big factor. So ensuring that expectations of the market. For instance, we work with beekeepers all over the world, and some communities are using different technologies to produce honey. So some people are using in Ethiopia and in rural Tanzania. A lot of producers are using traditional log hives and grass woven hives. And the interactions that happen between beekeepers and bees is different. So people harvest honey at night. They can't open those hives up as well and inspect them the way that they would with, different types of hive designs. And so, for instance, those bees and that honey can get a lot of smoke, and you can get smoky quality and character in that honey. And so if we go and get that smoky honey locally, it'll say, well, this is a local feature of the honey. Like, this is how it's been done. And it's a feature. It's not a problem. But if you take that honey and you bring it into the US market, some people would say, why is it smoky? And we're going to call this smoke taint. So then the market's saying, well, do we value this the same way? Because it has this characteristic. And what we've worked really hard to do is two things. One is to say to the market, look, this is a characteristic. This is not a drawback. This is because of local practices that have been done this way for a long time. On the flip side of that, you have to have a mechanism to communicate to the producers, and the producers need to know, okay, what happens if we change our methodology a little bit? What happens if we use a little less smoke? What happens if we use a different hive that allows us to open it up and inspect in different ways so that the honey doesn't get as smoky? Is it worthwhile to change that methodology if we can get into a different market or a bigger market, or people will pay a little bit more for that? So it's twofold. It's not saying completely what you're doing is wrong and bad. It's saying, okay, this is the reality where we are. What are the implications of that? Now we have a starting point to say, okay, where do we want to go? What is the goal of this? I think as producers, you know, ask yourself what, I think a lot of producers, when we talk, it's like, okay, our challenge is the market, right? We need a market for our products. But the market follows certain things. It follows, for instance, quality. It follows reliability, right? It follows things like pricing, price stability. It follows things like, when I said reliability, timeliness, right? Dependability, right? So when you're a producer looking at how do I get to this market, what are you trying to achieve and where do you want to fit
Yeah.
in this chain of events, right? It's coming from your place, and it's going to touch potentially many places along the way to get to someone, or maybe fewer if you have the ability to take on value-added roles. Maybe you start meeting with other beekeeping groups and consolidating and training. We work with local partners that can share information about quality standards and technologies and do trainings like that. But if you're a producer, how do you organize? How do you want to organize? Do you want to be the person that's organizing other beekeepers? Or do you want to be the beekeeper managing just, you know, your hives, or just the farmer just managing your vanilla vines and doing a great job on that?
Yeah.
And so where do you want to fit in that equation? I think asking those kind of questions.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think that is very important, Brian, because one of the things that came to my mind is that when you are an entrepreneur coming from a rural community, or you are working with minorities like indigenous or Afro communities, most of the time, most of those projects that are producing a product, they doesn't even understand what they are doing. No, what you said about the smoky honey, right? It is not the same here in the chocolate industry. We have a saying that we say, it is not the same uh, a good technique, that a chocolate that has a good technique, than a chocolate that has followed its tradition. No, it's not the same when
Right.
it's technically good made than culturally good made.
And
So
who made the decision about what's technically good made is the question,
exactly,
right? So who's deciding what that is? And
exactly,
that
exactly.
actually, in many circumstances, comes down to a narrative. Another example, I'll just give you another example. We work with communities in Ethiopia. They live in very remote forests, and these forests, they'll walk 4 hours to get into their hives. It's a lot of work. So they'll put their hives up, they'll come back. A few months later, they'll go back out into the forest to check on the progress of these bees, see how are they doing. And that'll give them information about when they want to come back and harvest. So then they'll wait another X amount of time, maybe a month or 2 months, and then they'll come back. And at that point, they're back and they're going to harvest. They're not going to come back a fourth time. So whether the honey is ready to go or not, meaning has the moisture in honey, if the moisture content's too high, it's considered at risk for
Yeah,
certain things to happen. So if they come back and the moisture is too high, from a technical level, they shouldn't harvest it, right? But they'll harvest it anyway. That honey is some of the best honey in the world.
yeah.
It comes here and people use it, and it wins awards and all these other things. But if you were to ask people in the industry here to look at that honey, they would say, "Oh no, I don't want to touch that. I'm afraid of that
Yeah.
because the moisture content's too high."
Yeah,
Whereas we're saying,
totally.
actually, no, this is a feature. This is a feature of this honey. This is a feature of these practices that are traditional. And can we value that?
Yeah, so Brian, you said something that I think it's very important for entrepreneurs nowadays, like how you are going to embrace your own narrative and how you are going to share your own narrative.
Mhm.
And for example, with this example that you gave to us, uh, what does an entrepreneur can do to embrace and to build that narrative to let the market know about the product. So what are those aspects that you have been taking in count to understand your market, to understand how you can sell better? What are those kind of advisory that you can give to us in order to create this kind of narratives? What those rural entrepreneur must focus in building these kind of narratives to boost their production or the products?
Sure. So I'd say there's two main ways to think about this. One is sort of, okay, uh, on a global level, how are people thinking about these rural areas? And that is like, let's just think about like UN development goals, right? And think about, okay, what does the global community talk about? What does it value right now? Like we can talk about carbon reductions. We can talk about well, let's just say carbon reductions, for instance, right? And let's talk about forest. So preservation of forest and forest products, for instance, is carbon reduction because you're preserving a carbon sink, right? So this is an example of like a very broad way of thinking. Then you also want to narrow down to, okay, what is my product? And that doesn't mean like, okay, I sell chocolate. That means, yes, I am a person that lives in a rural forest outside of Putla in Oaxaca, and I grow cacao, right? Well, I grow cacao, and that's my current way that I think that I live, but where am I? And what's around me? And what is the value of that? So take into this account, the place where you are does not exist everywhere.
Yeah.
Meaning that where you are and what you do, there's scarcity, right? It's not unlimited. So think about where you are, what you have around you, not just the cacao that you're growing, but think about the natural resources that you have. Think about your community members. Think about what are the cultural aspects to where I live that make my story unique, right? And everyone has a story. The question becomes, how do you transmit that story?
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing. The other side of the same kind of coin is, okay, yeah, if what I can do and what I know how to do is cacao production, how do I do that better? And better doesn't mean that I produce the best cacao in the world necessarily. Maybe I say, hey, I wanna produce big volumes and provide it for a more affordable price to the market. Okay. Or no, the work and care that we put into this in this process is difficult. So how do I think one of the most challenging things for entrepreneurs to do is to figure out how to value your time and how to value your product when you don't really have a great guidance other than like looking up other things on the internet that are comparable. So I think that's one way to do it, but I believe that really kind of talking to your community members, people that are outside of your direct community, seeing what's going on, and then figuring out where you want to fit, where are your strengths.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, Brian, I just want to share with you that also we have a little question from Jorge Ramos Sanchez that is in the chat, and also I want to invite all the people in this session to send us their questions. He's saying something related. Yes, quality, innovation, sustainability are the start condition to success road. But for example, uh, how is or have you ever worked before with groups in rural communities that have received international support? Have you ever worked with groups that have been creating alliances with other countries? And more than that, Brian, uh, how is for you to collaborate with people from across the globe? Because you, as an US citizen, I am very surprised and I am very proud to call you my friend and to see how you well connected are with the cultural roots of every place you touch. I have to say that you have this cultural focused way of doing business. And one of the things that we as rural entrepreneurs must understand is that it is the better to connect with people that really respect our territory, our cultural roots, our way to see the world, and how we can fit that into a sustainable economical relationship.
Yeah, thank you, Jorge, for the question, and Germán for expanding. Yeah, I think there's a challenge in terms of financing and aid, and I've myself tried to get government funding and things of this nature, only to see it sort of fall through. I've really, and this is not an encouraging comment, it's just it's a reality in many parts of the world and ways of life, is that a lot of the organizations that give the money are really looking to check boxes, and if you're not sort of versed in doing that sort of thing, even if you have an outstanding product,
Yeah.
it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really difficult to access that in any meaningful way. And I've done a lot of studying in my life, and I'm still not that versed in that kind of thing. So I still take this approach of, I want to build something slowly and steadily. I want to approach it not to grow it fast and become, some famous rich person overnight or whatever. The point is, I committed to what I'm building. And when I started it, I didn't know exactly what I was doing. It wasn't like I didn't have a business plan outside of my head. I had an idea, and I just started sort of walking down the path, metaphorically speaking, and trusting. It doesn't mean I didn't think about things along the way and say, is this working? Is this not working? But I found something that I cared about, and I cared about it enough to put myself in uncomfortable situations, meaning I knew I had these amazing honeys, and I knew that every time people in this part of the world tasted these honeys, their minds were blown. And I also knew it was worth it because the honeys actually are just honey. It's what the honey represents that actually really mattered to me. And that was the communities that were behind them, the communities and the places behind them. So when I lived in West Africa, I lived in a country called Guinea, which is a small country. I didn't speak French when I went there. I didn't speak Jikonke, which was the local language. I just kind of showed up and I was the only person in the community. And obviously everyone else was black and I'm like, clearly, you know what I mean? I had babies cry when they saw me because they'd never seen a person that looked like with my skin, you know? And I think spending a couple years there made me realize that we all come from different sort of socioeconomic backgrounds. We all have different upbringings. We all have a different starting point in life, right? And we have to accept that our perspective is not the most important one. It's just one perspective. So I say that because what I realize is that, you know, just because everyone looked different from me and everyone talked different from me and everyone, you know, ate different things from me, actually, it turned out that we had so much more in common than those things that were sort of on the surface that divided us. Like if someone's sitting around the table and farts, everyone's laughing. You know what I'm saying? It's everyone finds the same things funny, and everyone finds the similar things sad if a relative dies, you know? And what I realize is that, okay, let's just peel away these layers of things that make us so different. And all of a sudden, approaching people from different parts of the world is not so scary. In fact, you can learn so much more from people that have different perspectives from you than the ones that have the same perspective of you. As long
Yeah.
as you're willing to accept that your perspective is not paramount, that is not the most important one.
Yeah,
Right.
and actually I think that when we are aware about creating business or a relationship or an alliance with people that thinks like that, things get better. And Brian, talking about that, you know, like about how you can create relationships in terms to impact a rural community. Uh, what are those things that you have seen in these years that your work has been positively affecting the people that you collaborate with? I mean, what is the impact that your work is creating with these collaborations in these rural communities? What are those surprises that have come for you? Tell us more about that. How is that experience to work with rural communities?
I mean, the I I always have the most enjoyable times when I'm visiting. I don't spend a ton of my own personal time in a rural community. When I go to rural communities, it's usually some of the highest value things that I can do. And the work that we do, I hope it empowers, you know, rural communities to feel empowered, you know. When I say that, so for instance, we work with our beekeeping partners, and then we work with our maker partners, right? So the market side would be people that take these products and turn them into something else. And the beekeeping partners are the producers, right? And they're in rural areas. So what we try to do is highlight the rural partners and projects and get those as close to the makers' customers as possible, right? So
Yeah.
let's take a forest in Tanzania, for instance, and we work with 1,000 beekeepers, a group of 1,000 beekeepers in that forest. And that forest doesn't have a lot of options to sell their honey.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is those beekeepers, they cut down some of their woodland to grow other things that they know they'll have a market for, right? If we provide or supplement the market for that, and that's dependable, then they're like, okay, well, instead of cutting down this forest, now our land that our ancestors had, I get to protect it. It's worth protecting it because there's value. It's tangible. Everyone lives by the same economic rules. We all have to have some way to feed ourselves, to feed our family, to invest in education, to feel like we're making some impact and that we have some place in the world, right? That's meaning
Yeah.
or purpose. So to provide that is, I mean, that's, if we can provide access to that, that's way more than a transaction. But the next thing that happens, if we get that story to a market, we can take that story and show it to the producer. Now, all of a sudden, Swahili, Tanzanian Miombo woodland honey is on a beer bottle in Cambridge, Massachusetts, talking about the story of where this honey's from in a part of Tanzania no one here has ever heard of.
Yeah.
And you can show that label, you can show that story to the community that produced that honey. And they can say, oh my God, my honey is in this beer or in this product. And it's going full circle. And if we can get that back to the community, that's even, I mean, that's the next level. And so the next, I think the thing that I think about a lot is, okay, how do we connect? We do it through honey now and storytelling, but how do we connect producers and consumers, right? And I think about like Wiley did it for us in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, sure.
Wiley gave us the conditions, it gave us the tools and a way to do it, because not everyone has the tools. And I think it's cool because in a lot of cases, it's the producers who have a challenge coming to the makers, right? Or the producers coming to the market. But at least starting, how do we get the market to the makers? And building loyalty for the makers to say, oh, I know the person that produced this honey. I know the person that produced this chocolate. I got lucky enough to go down and visit them.
Yeah, sure. So Brian, in order to understand better and for all the audience that we have today, you said something that I personally think is very important when we are starting a project from the rurality, that things are much more slower than it will happen in a big city or in other kind of businesses. So trying to understand much more deep this wording, um, what advice can you give to all the rural entrepreneurs in the Americas that are living in their towns, that are having impact in their communities? What kind of advices you can give to them to be much more resilient, to keep believing in their work? What do you think that this kind of industry will take us to in the future? What do you see in the US market? The US market is changing in some way. They are looking more for this kind of production that is coming from native communities or from rural areas. Tell us much more about that. What do you see right now?
Yes. Well, I would say that the market here in the US is increasingly placing value on knowing where things came from, and not just where things came from in terms of geographically, but who produced the things, in what context. So back to the point earlier is, okay, what do you have around you? What makes this place unique? You know, you all have you all have a story and something unique to where you are and what you do, what your practice is. And that might be inherent to the geography, but it also might be something that you've done or your family done or some tradition. And finding that is thinking about it in that way may take some effort to shift in terms of valuing, saying, what is the value of this tradition of ours? Instead of seeing everything that everyone else is doing and saying, oh, I want to be like them. Maybe we should take a look at where we already are and what we already have and say, okay, how do we value this? And how do we share this practice that's unique to us with the world? And there's a huge value to that. Because the markets now, it's almost like creating little micro markets, because people love when there's something scarce or unique. And every one of you has a unique story to tell. There's no debate in that. Like there's no, we might have similar stories, right? But no one is from where you are, grew up with your family and your background, did what got to where you are the way that you did. So how do you tell that story? And there's value in that. There's value in the product that you bring to market. And the combination of those two things is where you get to be creative. And I think that's going to be increasingly important, going forward. The world doesn't want mass produced, monocultured products, to speak in agricultural terms. They want to know, like, where's the spirit, or where's the soul, where's the value and whatever this is that I'm consuming.
Yeah, amazing. And Brian, well, we are just a few minutes for this session, and I also want to invite you, all the people that it's in this session, to send more questions to say it here on live. But lastly, one of the things that me as a rural entrepreneur, I am always wondering, how hard or what recommendations you can give to groups of producers or entrepreneurs to take their products to the United States. We know that here in Mexico, for example, we have the TMEC, like these free trade papers that our countries have signed. But for example, what is happening with places like Africa? What is happening with your experience with Colombia? What kind of like bureaucratic stuff you have been dealing with, and we as entrepreneurs should be aware of?
Yeah. Well, every place is different. We do have trade agreements, of course, that are beneficial for a lot of products, in terms of tariffs and things like that. Those sorts of things also exist in like East Africa we have NAFTA, but there's in East Africa, there's something called AGOA, which is the African Growth and Equal Opportunities Act. And those have similar sort of ramifications. I think what you really want to do is find trusted people, build those relationships. Start somewhere, and do something. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to do. We started with a very small scale project 6 years ago. And we were lucky enough to get, 2,000 pounds of honey from this project in Colombia. And, it took us 5 years, but now it's 10 tons. And next year we might be doing a 20-ton shipment from that project. So all of a sudden, it seems like things happen very slowly when you do it this way. It's like, and they feel like they're happening very slowly, but what you're building is a foundation. And I'm only speaking from my experience. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. And I know that time is always a factor of the essence, but I can tell you that doing it this way, I know that the customers that I have are going to come back to me even when times are tough because we have a direct relationship. I mean, I have customers coming over to my house for dinner. You know, Germán, I would love to set up a chocolate project, you know, from Oaxaca at some point to work with a brewery here. It's all from little things, relationships that
Yeah.
build along the way, doing things that build trust and doing what you say you're going to do. And that's why I recommend starting small, is because if you start small, it's much easier to deliver. And it'll guide the way to doing things in a much larger way and not having as big a mistakes will be made. Let's just say that
Yeah.
mistakes will be made. Nothing's perfect. So by the time you get to something big, you will have learned a lot of things. And I know it's hard when, you know, there's this urgency to be successful and to live. I mean, we have to eat and things, but I encourage also that, you know, my advice is to take a measured approach and to work with people that deliver on what they say they're going to do. And you should do the same.
Yeah,
So,
sure. No, well, Brian, I think that that mindset is the one that gave us a lot of resiliency from the rurality, you know. And just as a summary, I would like to share some bullet points that you have shared with us. And I think that we should be always remembering that as the importance of building your story and create your narrative as a rural entrepreneur with your company, it is very important that you can embrace your own identity to create a history that you can share with the world. That will be very important for a rural entrepreneur. Another thing that you said that I found very, very important is how, with your activities, you are going to protect your natural resources and how you are going to reduce your carbon print in the world and how you are going to communicate that with your customers. Then it is very important for a rural entrepreneur or for a businessman that is trying to get into the United States or to export their goods to take a look into the trade agreements that their countries have with other nations. That is also very, very important to have in mind. Then it is so cool that we are challenging the narrative of fail fast and do things fast, because I think that more than ever after the pandemic, rural communities have this opportunity to understand better that creating things slowly but secure, it is much better than trying to going fast and to not understand deeply what they are currently doing. Also, last but not least, I think that rural entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general must have this building community mindset that can create deep relationships with their customers and with the communities they are working with. I think that that is very important, more than all the things that are outside. I think that creating this kind of bonding is very important. And I want to thank you, Brian, for all this insightful conversation. I really believe that all the people that is in the room has gained a lot of experience from what you said. It is very important to have these conversations because as I told you, we are challenging the narrative, the things and the business in rural communities or in rural areas or in indigenous communities or in Afro communities are way different than what we see on the books. So please, Brian, you have a final thought that you would like to share with us, with our audience, where we can see your work, where we can contact you, Please tell us more about it.
Yeah, I'll put my contact in the chat after this. No, I think I think that it's not easy to be an entrepreneur. It's not easy to do it really in most conditions, unless you have some really unique circumstances that lend a lot of resources and you know, it's a challenging process, no matter what. And rural entrepreneurship in itself is a different, it comes with its own set of challenges, but it comes with some really beautiful opportunities too. And I think that we need more rural entrepreneurs. And I think there's so much creativity in Latin America. I mean, in the community that you have, there's just so many unique perspectives in how you look at problems and challenges and opportunities. You know, just value your own. Doesn't mean don't listen to other people's perspectives, but value your own experiences and your own perspectives that you've gained, and trust in your ability to figure things out. And you will, you know, but you have to trust that you can do that. I know that's not a specific measurable thing to say, but everyone's situation is different.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much for your time, for your friendship. Please write in the chat box your LinkedIn address or your contact information so all the people that is in this session can continue in touch with you. Brian, it's a huge pleasure to have you this, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation that all the team of Kingala and the U.S. Embassy to Mexico made to you. And I want to hear from Jose Luis Reyes, please, if you are going to give us final remarks. And thank you so much for all the people that connected today with us. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you for being here. It was a great pleasure and an honor to have you both here. And for me, it's just like to say these final words of thank you to all of you for being here during this session. And just like a quick reminder, we have one session every month, and this is gonna be hopefully forever, but at least it's gonna be for the following 21 next month. So we hope to have you all here every month, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you, mainly Brian and Germán.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.